The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the DataView Show, episode number 18. I'm Scott Hayes, your host today, lifetime IBM champion, IBM DB2 Gold consultant. Follow me on Twitter at SRHayes. We got a really cool guest today. Gentleman's name is Ronan Murphy. He's in the beautiful country of Ireland, located in Cork, Ireland. He's the group chief executive, translated to United States. That means he's the CEO of GetVisibility.com. And we're also showing his LinkedIn connection there. Ronan, how are you today?
I'm wonderful, Scott. Thank you.
Oh, that is great news. And tell me about the weather in Ireland today.
Yeah, we're in Ireland and the UK. We are having a really nice sunny spell. So it's it's good. It's a shame we're in lockdown, but nonetheless, it's easier to handle lockdown when the sun is shining.
There you go. That is good news. And before we get into all the technical stuff that you have to share, how about you let our audience know something personal about yourself? Any hobbies or anything we should know about?
Well, outside of work, I'm a little bit of a workaholic, but outside of work, I've taken up cycling. It's a good way to keep fit while we're in the midst of this pandemic, you know. So really enjoying that.
Cycling, excellent. I used to ride at least 50 miles a day when I was a kid in high school. I love cycling too. All right, with that said, here's the required gibberish. The opinions expressed are that of Scott Hayes and the show guests and do not necessarily reflect that of IBM Corporation or the IBM community. DB2 is a registered trademark of IBM, which is also a registered trademark. IBM has several registered trademarks, and we make no claims to any marks belonging to anyone. The event is being recorded and replays will be publicly available. Please mind your manners. So what's ahead? Here's the flow of the show. We're going to get Ronan on talking about dealing with big data security challenges, cybersecurity. We'll have a few news bits for you at the midpoint, ask a couple of polling questions, and get Ronan back on to finish up. And then we'll do thank yous. So with that all said, let's make Ronan our presenter and start learning about what he has to share with us. Ronan, I'm clicking a button on my side, making you the presenter. Go ahead and show your screen, sir.
Are we looking good?
It is looking spectacular.
Okay, so thank you, Scott, and it's really a pleasure to be on the DataView show today, and thank you to all of the guys in IBM, guys and girls in IBM for organizing this. So today I'm going to cover a lot of different areas when we talk about the big data security challenge. We're not going to go into too much of the technology solutions. We're going to look at them at the end. But I've seen a few of the other DataView shows, and you've done brilliant deep dives into the technical aspects of the products. So I'm gonna talk more about the problem and how it is that organizations are addressing them from various different perspectives. And I think when we talk about technology, we find ourselves in the midst of the what's often referred to as the fourth industrial revolution, and it's defined by digital transformation, which is one of the buzzwords which we see flying around a lot. And every company is now becoming a tech company, and over the next 20 years, big data, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence are going to present some of the most profound challenges faced by humanity, and no person, no industry, or indeed no country is going to be immune from their effects. So at the end of the day, this all boils down to data. And I often think about the vast quantities of data that organizations are handling, and I think of the phrase, you can't see the wood from the trees. And when someone or an organization is very involved in the details of something, it can often be difficult to notice it as a whole. And as a security professional, it often feels like this when we look at the data challenge that exists. So, so before we jump into some of the topics that make this interesting, we're just going to take a quick look at the industry as a whole to see some of the interesting things that are happening. And it's almost impossible to talk about anything now without COVID-19, unfortunately, becoming a topic of discussion. And it's a huge challenge with COVID-19. It's caused massive global disruption on an unprecedented scale, and it's required organizations to really look at the way they operate and the way that they handle data, because we're observing at the coalface of security changing patterns of behavior from threat actors, and we're noticing waves of coronavirus related cyber attacks. And just to be clear, I mean, this isn't a new team. This is hackers have been preying on victims during or shortly after high profile events for as long as I can remember. And much of the world is now been ordered to practice social distancing. There's an unprecedented number of people working from home for the first time, which it requires a different level of maturity. And companies are then rushing to provision laptops for employees, deploy collaboration software, implement VPN infrastructure so that they can access tools. So if you were a hacker, I mean, what does this opportunity look like for you? And I guess you know, they're pivoting, and their attack methods are logically changing to exploit these changes to the global workforce. So mass working over remote connection, it leads to mass remote login activity. This activity is mostly over private insecure machines with user accounts that have only recently been set up for that remote access, and therefore it makes remote login credentials the target for hackers. So what we're seeing as being the real challenges that are happening or that are affecting customers is that, number one, the root cause is the remote access credential theft. If hackers or threat actors can compromise the remote login details, it spells significant challenges for the organization. The compromising of employees' personal devices. So again, this has created unprecedented situation where there's the use of mass personal devices by employees that are working from home. A lot of these organizations, these devices have never been effectively hardened, and that presents challenges. Email is still the biggest attack vector, which again produces significant challenges, and then remote malicious logins. And a lot of this has been done on skeleton staff. So it's presenting significant challenges for the organization. When we then look at the month of May, it's been an eventful month. We've seen Brazil's biggest cosmetic company, Natura, accidentally left hundreds of gigabytes of customers' personal and payment-related information publicly accessible on their cloud. We've seen the really high profile breach of a low-cost carrier in the United Kingdom called EasyJet. And it looks like up to 9 million of their customers have had their data stolen and exposing payment information and email addresses. We've seen that Firebase had over 4,000 users compromised with various credentials being stolen. And then DigitalOcean is one of the biggest modern web hosting platforms who had a significant data leak exposing a lot of their customers' information. So it's been a really eventful month. It's been a very eventful year, but I think the whole COVID-19, the pandemic, it means that organizations have less resources to deal with the challenges that are coming. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty and doubt out there, and it's a perfect breeding ground hackers to exploit the users and also to exploit the enterprise. So challenging times ahead. So when we look at data, that's why all of the guests have joined here today. We have a unique perspective on the data problem. We operate cybersecurity centres across North America, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and mainland Europe. And we deliver 24 hours a day, 7 days a week cybersecurity services, utilising a lot of the IBM portfolio products like Guardium and QRadar to deliver that functionality. And we are all too aware of the challenges that organizations have to wrestle with when we look at the data problem. And I've broken it down into kind of 5 key areas here. And at the macro level, we've got the regulatory environment, which I'll talk about more in a moment, which is driving a lot of change in terms of behavior when we look at data. You couple that with the massive unprecedented growth in data across organizations. You then look at organizations trying to monetize that growth in data, trying to drive operational efficiency by leveraging technology, and they move to the cloud, they move to IBM, to Azure, to Amazon, and the complexities that brings around data. We've an unprecedented rise in cyber attacks and in insider threats within organizations. And we've organizations really wrestling with the ability to understand that data and to securely and effectively lock that data down so that they're not losing it and they're not falling foul of regulators. So there's a lot of forces that are becoming extremely impactful for the data privacy, the data trust sector. So when we look at the data problem, I mean, big data, it's a huge component of the digital transformation story, and the current state of data protection, the problem is growing, and also so are the obstacles. I mean, if you sit back for a minute and you look at the scale, we've created more data in the last 2 years than we have from the dawn of humanity until 2017 or 2018. In the near future, almost every object on Earth will be generating data, and almost everything we do leaves a trail of digital exhaust, a perpetual stream of text, location data, and other information, and all that information will live long on after each of us is gone. And in fact, I read an interesting thing recently. We're being exposed to as much data now in a single day than our 15th century ancestors would have been exposed to in their entire lifetime. And it's estimated by 2021, there'll be 50 zettabytes of information in the world.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, if you took every grain of sand on this planet and you multiplied it by 50, that would give you the idea of the scale of this data. But I mean, you need to be, we need to be incredibly careful, because in this vast ocean of data, it can be used in tremendously positive ways by organizations to drive competitive advantage. And the more information you collect, the larger the problems you can solve. But equally, data can become a tremendous liability if it's not collected and processed and managed properly. It can mean that data is not just a tremendous asset for the business, it can also become a tremendous liability for the business. And some of the stats you'll see here, which are fascinating, after organizations get breached now, because of the complexity of the network, because of the scale of the data, it can take them on average 279 days to understand what has happened. A lot of these facts and figures are well known, but it's a huge problem for organizations to try and deal with and to try and get their heads around. When we did a survey recently of a large cross-section of our customer base, and data at risk findings were incredible. And when you looked at the data within organizations, over 1,000 had stale user accounts in terms of the access to the data that people had. 59% of the data was suffering from ROT, which is an acronym for redundant, obsolete, and trivial data. Over 1,000 sensitive files, really important data, was available to all employees. The average company had found that more than 500,000 files were exposed. And when you looked at the folder system within the organization, over 100,000 folders were open to every employee. So the data challenge is significant, and unfortunately, it is across every sector, whether it was utilities, energy utilities, government, manufacturing, retail, finance, and pharma. Some of them had a higher propensity to hold intellectual property or a very sensitive regulated data, but nonetheless, the challenge of having visibility across that data, having the understanding of who can access it, what controls are around it, is an enormous problem. And when we go back to some of the industry forces I spoke about at the beginning, and if we drill down into those in a little bit more detail, what we see is that the biggest headache for organizations is the regulatory mandates that we are seeing coming in country. We've just recently, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had the second anniversary of the General Data Protection Regulation from Europe. Not long after the GDPR came into force, the US started to follow suit with specific regulatory mandates in certain states, such as California, and they brought in the California Consumer Privacy Act. And then there was similar type regulatory mandates in other states, a little bit of a patchwork quilt in terms of the United States, but nonetheless really solid progress in terms of data regulation. We also saw the introduction of the bipartisan US Cybersecurity Disclosure Act. That was a big move forward, and it requires any publicly traded company in the United States of America to have a cybersecurity expert actually on their board. And we've also started to see the punitive side of it, of the regulatory mandates, with pretty eye-watering fines issued to both British Airways by the ICO in the UK, the regulator. That was 230 million, and 100 million issued to Marriott Hotel Group. So it's no joke when you sit back and you look at the punitive implications from these. But what I want to just do for a moment, because I think it's really topical at this moment in time, is I want to drill down from the macro level, such as GDPR or the Cybersecurity Disclosure Act or the California Consumer Privacy Act, and I want to look at regulatory mandates as they affect specific industry verticals, because whether it's financial or automotive, such as HIPAA or TISAX, or critical services, all industries are now starting to follow suit, and they're starting to understand that they, at a more granular level, have to enforce data classification, regulatory mandates, and cybersecurity mandates on their members and the companies that operate within their sector. And the most interesting one we're looking at the moment is the CMMC, which is the regulatory mandate which has been issued by the US Department of Defense, and that comes into effect from June next month in the United States of America. Now, they have a couple of different compliance mandates, including DFARS and the NIST SP 800-171. And what these relate to is that they cover any of the contractors who work with the Department of Defense. So if they store, transmit any controlled or unclassified information, then they have to comply with a minimal security standards that is outlined by these various regulatory mandates. And they have to, I mean, let's step back for a moment. The US Department of Defense, the vast majority of the services that they consume is delivered by subcontractors. And they've identified that if you're a nation state and you want to compromise the Department of Defense, then it's much easier to compromise the guys who are doing the spot welding on the on the fighter jets or the tanks, or the guys that are cutting the grass within the facilities that the Department of Defense manage. It's much easier to compromise those guys than trying to compromise the Pentagon or the White House or these very sophisticated networks that they use. So the aim of these regulatory mandates is to ensure that all unclassified Department of Defense data that they store on contractors' servers are protected with adequate cybersecurity safeguards. And the ability to assess the consequences of a data breach and the ability to report on it have become incredibly important. And this isn't just the Department of Defense, it's across every sector. And I guess if you put it simply, the main areas of focus that the Department of Defense contractors of again, any size or scope must be aware of is that in order to maintain their contracts and have the ability to bid on the 100 billion a year of DoD contracts, they have to adhere to these regulatory mandates. The cybersecurity maturity model certification, it's a kind of a unifying standard, and it covers 300,000 companies in the supply chain for the Department of Defense, and it's requiring all of these organizations to go on a journey of cybersecurity and data maturity, where these companies have to learn the technical requirements, they have to prepare for certification, they have to understand best practice policies and procedures, they have to understand where the gaps are in terms of how they handle, collect and process data that relates to the Department of Defense, and it's presenting significant challenges. And for organizations who have not taken the data problem seriously. And then the reason, again, this is important is this is traversing every industry, pharma, retail, financial, healthcare. Every organization now has to sit back and they have to look at these challenges and they have to be able to deal with them head on. If we couple the explosion in data, the regulatory landscape changes, and we then look at the business looking to drive operational efficiency by leveraging technology, we have to look to the cloud. And many businesses put their cloud migration plan into motion when they see the immense benefits that the cloud brings. After all, I mean, cloud services have skyrocketed in popularity over the last decade, and failing to be able to offer your services in the cloud or your software in the cloud is seen as being behind the times. However, in the race to drive these operational efficiencies in the cloud, cloud security has become an enormous problem. The insecure cloud has become the second biggest attack vector, just behind phishing. Which is a significant problem. And remember, cloud migration presents significant challenges if organizations haven't properly mapped out and understand the risks. I mean, there's far less consumer control if the proper procedures haven't been put in place. You tend to see a lot of unauthorized instance spawning, secure deletion issues, improper user privileges. That becomes more significant as organizations get bigger. The insider threat problem, the ability of organizations to understand where the data is, who has access to the data, what are the privileges, what are the risks to stalling cloud migration projects based on the governance, risk and compliance mandates. It can have the potential to be fraught with challenges and risks for the business. Some of the most high-profile breaches we are now witnessing are organizations who have migrated to the cloud and they haven't been able to effectively identify the data they're moving, identify who's got access to that data, lock down the cloud instances effectively, and ensure that they're adhering properly to their regulatory mandates. So it becomes a significant challenge. Actually, one of the really interesting ones we've recently had to deal with is a client. They have 147,000 employees. They were looking at a major migration of 20,000 servers into their private cloud, but their intellectual property was in the form of their code-based repositories, and that was residing on thousands of servers who their developers were spinning up many instances of, and a lot of that data was used for collaboration. Before they could adhere to their regulatory mandate, they had to be able to effectively classify that data, have visibility across that data, and securely migrate that data. And when they sat back and tried to understand across these 20-odd thousand servers where that data was, it presented a much bigger blocker for the business. We then have the insider threat problem. And the insider threat problem is, again, a very, very significant problem for organizations. I read a report recently that more than 80% of employees planning to leave an organization bring data with them. I'm sure that's no surprise to anybody who's on this call. These flight risk individuals in this article are, when they analyze how did the organization manage this and how did they try and control it, they had absolutely no idea where to even start. Most people who were exfiltrating sensitive data from within the organization were doing it over email. The next most popular was that they were using cloud storage websites, Dropbox, OneDrive, Box. Also, employees were stealing sensitive corporate information and intellectual property, and a lot of this was being done through downloads with unauthorized removable devices. And then there was significant issues with SharePoint and the snooping through of data within SharePoint that didn't have the adequate access credentials to it. The issues with cloud collaboration tools and the utilization of cloud to drive operational efficiency is presenting huge problems from a data leakage standpoint. And IT admins and security operation teams and security operation centers simply do not have visibility into what happens with respect to how users share data, how they collaborate on data. It's a massive problem. And we see it within our security operations center. Companies who have not made the investment in technologies such as Guardium or GetVisibility have real problems in understanding what is happening to the granular data that is traversing the organization's network. So everything I've spoken about at a very, very high macro level it paints a picture of significant challenges at a data level. It's relevant. Yes.
Before you jump into solutions, is this a good time to take a quick break?
Absolutely, Scott.
All right. Let's just sip on some tea or something.
Sure.
All right. So, some news for the DataView show community. We've got more shows coming up. June 4th, IBM Replication, Data Delivery in 2020. There we go, creating more data for Ronan and his team to look after. Let's just make that data replicate. 18th of June, Watson Internet of Things, Tririga Platform and Workflows. That'll be pretty interesting. You know, the Internet of Things, that's more explosion of data, all these devices and sensors, and I can track my car. I can push a button on my phone and start my car and lock it. It's very exciting times we're living in. If you'd like the DataView show to continue beyond June 18th, I'm going to ask everybody to do me a favor and email Stuart Littell at IBM and tell them you love the DataView show and you'd like it to continue. That's Stuart Littell, slittell@ibm.com. I might even put that email address in the chat for everybody. iDoug would like me to share with you information. The iDoug Dallas conference has been turned into a virtual event taking place July 20, 21, and 23. Don't know what happened to the 22nd, but those 3 days, they're running a virtual conference with lots of sessions right to your home or office, and you can learn a lot, and it's going to be great. No need to travel or get on a plane or stay in a hotel. Just stay at home, stay in your office, and learn. And the fee on this is very nominal. If you become an iDoug premium member, then you'll be able to attend this for free. Some URLs you want to take a look at, IBM, thecommunity.ibm.com. That's how to get involved with the IBM community. Lots of great resources there. IBM.biz/DB2 console, that's the new monitoring tool that will replace DSM. IIUG.org, that's the Informix user group. Again, back to iDoug.org, register early and save. And there's a really cool tool that I learned about last fall, the Watson Studio Auto AI. You just feed it spreadsheets and data, and it tells you things about your data that you probably didn't know. Let's ask our good-looking audience a polling question. First polling question, super easy. Dear good-looking audience, do you care about data security? Just making sure we have the right people here, Ronan.
Sure.
You know, with all that data growth you were talking about, I wonder how much of that data growth is millennials taking selfies.
I'm sure it's a pretty large percentage of it, Scott.
All those pictures, 2 to 4 megabytes in size. Pop, pop,
Indeed.
pop. Okay,
Indeed.
let's close the poll, share the results. And it is verified. We have the right audience with us today. People care about data security, and that's good. I'll ask people, how did you learn about today's show? Did you find out about us on Twitter, LinkedIn, our newsletter, the show homepage, or the IBM community? Lots of different ways we use to get the word out about the show. Give our polling questions 30 seconds or until 80% of the audience responds. So click your mouse and we can giddy up and move along a little faster. Going once, going twice, closing the poll, sharing the results. And today it's a tie between the newsletter and the IBM community. Very good. And that's it for the questions that I had to ask. Let's get Ronan back on. I'm going to make you the presenter again. There you go. Please talk about solutions.
Okay, so just before I jump into the solutions, we operate for the last number of years security operations centers around the globe, and we sit at the coalface of the cybersecurity challenge. We're like the guys in the trenches at the war, at the coalface of it, and across every sector: manufacturing, healthcare, pharmaceutical, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we are acutely aware of the challenges and the problems that are facing organizations when you deal with data, and how you keep your regulators happy, how you protect your intellectual property, how you protect your competitive advantage, and all of the various challenges that go with the big data problem. So we know it is incredibly challenging to protect, and again, we see it stemming from many different areas. But as we just talked about, more data is being created, changed, shared, and stored than ever before. And an organization's ability to collect and process data is critical to running its business, but it also, as we know, can create tremendous liabilities if it's mismanaged. And this continuous wave of new information, new data, makes this really challenging to understand what the data you hold actually is, where it lives, how it's being used, because it is incredibly dynamic. And again, because of COVID-19, that's being emphasized more than ever as people have to access, collaborate, share, change this data working from their own living rooms. And this data could be incredibly sensitive intellectual property or competitive advantage information that relates to your business. And especially as we discussed, you're migrating more of this data into the cloud, which makes the data, again, to a degree, more accessible by more parties. And it also, again, creates more risk around whether or not that privacy of that data is actually being protected. And then when we looked at the privacy, I mean, we drilled down into specific regulatory mandates around the Department of Defence, but those new regulations and regulatory mandates are hitting absolutely every sector in every corner of the globe. And they're creating much more stringent requirements around how organizations in every sector handle that data, and especially when it relates to individuals or to intellectual property. And it seems like a new regulation now at this stage is being passed every month, and the ability to keep up with variations on these policies across different geographies is presenting more challenges on its own. And the penalties, as we've seen with Marriott and Uber and Equifax and British Airways, are steep, and boards of directors are pushing the responsibility down to data protection officers or chief information officers, trying to find out, you know, we need you to fix this problem. We need you to tell us if we are compliant in how we are handling this data, processing this data, securing this data, and so forth. And because we're seeing a huge explosion in different technologies coming on stream from a cyber perspective, it can be an incredibly confusing landscape for organizations to understand what it is they use to protect that data. And it also brings in significant operational complexities for organizations to deal with. And then you underpin that whole story with the fact that we are seeing a massive increase in the volume of sophisticated and complex global cyber threats targeting organizations in every industry vertical. So you again, reiterating my points at the start, it's almost like we are dealing with the perfect storm. So from a smart tech and GetVisibility perspective, we use two technologies to deliver this service to our enterprise clients globally, and they are IBM Guardium and GetVisibility. And IBM's view on the ability of organizations on the ability to secure data is they believe organizations need smarter data protection, and it has to be delivered via a unified platform. And there's three key areas in that philosophy. And one is you need to have insights into that data. You need to be able to understand what the risk is and understand where that risk lies within the business, so that when the board of directors or the chief executive come to the compliance team or come to the security team or come to the stakeholders who are responsible for that, that they can answer the questions that are being posed. They believe, IBM believe, that you need to be able to automate with purpose, so you can reduce risk with less effort. And finally, you have to be able to scale so that you can seamlessly adopt new technologies while remaining secure. Some of the biggest challenges we have seen has been the inability of organizations, after they have made investments in various different technologies, is the ability to scale those technologies in line with the business growth or the data growth within the organization. So if you can cover the insight element, the automation element, and the scaling element, and you have all of those three core areas working together, you're not only able to better protect your data, but you can do it in such a way that accelerates your existing business and technology processes. So with Guardium Insights, you're building the capability to visualize and to understand data risk and compliance anywhere, and then to take informed actions around that data, which is incredibly important, because remember, when you see the vast majority of major cybersecurity breaches happening, organizations have 72 hours to comply with the majority of the regulatory mandates which they have to adhere to. But you have to ask the question, what are you going to know in 72 hours? If you've got thousands of servers with millions of files and you don't have visibility, or you don't have an understanding of what or where that data is, really, what are you going to be able to disclose to regulators within that 72-hour period? And also, what are you going to tell the markets? We know that the punitive implication of not adhering to the regulatory mandates is steep, but conversely, the markets take a very dim view of organizations who don't appear to have an accurate understanding of what their data footprint is. And we've seen share price drop by as much as 7% for organizations who haven't been able to answer those questions. So the visualization within the platform is incredibly important. And then there's the ability to automate with purpose, reduce risk with less effort to help your team work smarter. So it means you need the ability to integrate multiple security tools. We integrate our GetVisibility software platform with Guardium, which proves to be an incredibly powerful solution for our clients in our Security Operations Center. Examine potential risks across environments, uncover potential threats and activities, and to reduce risk and cost. And then the ability to scale. I mean, this is often overlooked when organizations make investments in technology and they don't make the adequate investments from a scaling perspective. So the ability to seamlessly adopt new technologies to support security-rich business transformation or digital transformation, to what we regularly refer to as flexible deployment models with extensible architecture, pre-built security compliance knowledge bases. So as you look to CMMC or NIST or TISAX or a lot of these more complex regulatory mandates, which to be honest make CCPA and GDPR almost look straightforward, having the ability to pull these compliance mandates and runbooks out of the box becomes incredibly important. So with Guardium, organizations get the ability to generate visibility, automation, and scalability for smarter data compliance and protection. And it allows the organizations to have their policy management, their reporting, their dashboards, their investigation, and their analytics under a single platform, which becomes incredibly powerful for the organization. And you as an organization, you move to a position where you're no longer having a GRC, a governance, risk and compliance team looking after the data question, and an information security or cyber security team looking after your cyber security posture. You now have the ability to integrate the data problem into the overall cybersecurity solution. And what we have done very effectively is we have had the ability to integrate with products such as IBM QRadar, integrate the data issue into the Security Operations Center. So you now have level 1 SOC analysts who are responsible for trouble ticketing, alerts from your identity access management or from your firewalls at 2 a.m. at night, who now are also taking the alerts from your data governance controls within the organization. Because without having a centralized platform and the ability to understand and discover and classify this data, it's incredibly difficult for SOC operators or security personnel to have any idea if what's happening with the data is legitimate or if it is shady in terms of an issue within the environment. So with your centralized view of the data, it's incredibly powerful, again, from letting you understand what your compliance posture looks like, the number of data sources at risk, the number of users at risk, anomalies that are occurring within the data estate, outliers, and it allows your security team to very effectively deal with these, to quickly visualize and click through so that they understand, to run the predefined audit reports in seconds, and to discover hidden threats and potential risks. So it becomes incredibly powerful for the business. And when you look at it from a benefits perspective overall, after you've made the investment, again, you have broad visibility and risk-based insights. Remember, organizations can have hundreds, if not thousands, of databases scattered throughout their private cloud, their hybrid cloud, their public cloud, within their legacy data center. So having that visibility and that understanding of the risk-based insights is incredibly powerful. And in the unlikely event that there's a breach, it does provide the capability for the organization to respond to regulators within 72 hours and to effectively communicate even back to the markets what has happened in terms of a breach and the controls that were in place. Long-term, Guardium provides long-term storage to support the various compliance mandates. A lot of our clients are in the regulated insurance space, and they need to keep data for 10 years. And again, they need to have the visibility of that data, know when to delete it, archive it, and various different risk categories such as encryption and so forth. Reporting in seconds, the ability to monitor and protect across all environments, streamline the protection architecture, and then of course flexibility, which has been enhanced by the IBM acquisition of Red Hat, but also flexibility across large complex estates. So we have coupled within our own security operations center our data in our data governance portfolio. We use Guardium, and that provides us with all of the ability to manage the large data lakes within the database environment and provide all of the benefits we've just spoken about. And then we use GetVisibility for the unstructured real-time data. So for example, the GetVisibility platform, it utilizes the latest in deep learning and artificial intelligence. When organizations are creating data in real time, whether that's an email, an AutoCAD document, a schematic, whatever the document is, GetVisibility will allow the user to classify that data in real time as internal, confidential, external, private. But if the user misclassifies the document in real time, which is a huge problem, having users' ability to understand the data they're creating, they will have an agent sitting on their endpoint, which is connected to a highly sophisticated machine learning model, and that will help the user understand if they're misclassifying the document or if they need to reclassify based on what the model believes it is. So this complements technologies like Guardium. It helps organizations to improve data governance issues as well in real time, integrating in not only to Guardium but also technologies such as QRadar, and allowing organizations to utilize machine learning at scale. When organizations use GetVisibility with Guardium and they run it across their estate, they get a very, very granular view of their unstructured data. Again, across email, across all file shares, SharePoint, Dropbox, OneDrive, Box, etc. And the granularity will tell them from, you know, if across HR, financial, legal, technical, business, and it will allow them to make very important decisions around the controls they wish to put around that data, and integrate into the technology stack that they use. Again, this is very powerful for a new data being created on the fly. Again, if you create an email or a Word doc or an AutoCAD file, the classification is very important, and all of the classification sitting on all file shares within the network. So the combined solution of Guardium Insights and GetVisibility, we found within our Security Operations Center, is the most powerful capability that we have seen for organizations, again, across pharmaceutical, manufacturing, retail, government, finance and healthcare, to deal with this data problem. When you combine the two solutions, you have an incredibly powerful package. It allows organizations to very quickly understand where their intellectual property is across their organization. In a lot of instances, this intellectual property can take the form of very complex documentation. Again, it could be AutoCAD documents, it could be code repositories, it could be schematics, it could be ingredients for the manufacture of drugs or for food substances. And the ability to be able to train a machine learning model and to be able to search the entirety of your network using that machine trained model can very quickly classify that data, and it can allow the organization to make very important decisions around what they do with that data. Again, do they delete it? Do they archive it? Do they encrypt it? Do they migrate it? Do they restrict access? So that becomes incredibly powerful. And dealing with governance, risk and compliance, redundant, obsolete and trivial data is another very important benefit. Again, as we see organizations looking to migrate to the cloud, as we look at organizations trying to drive operational efficiency by leveraging technology, storage becomes expensive. As Scott said, all those selfies and all that information that's been created, duplication, collaboration presents risks. It can result in breaching compliance mandates. It can result in, when there is unfortunately a breach within an organization, a lack of visibility of what has been affected. So by using the technologies I've spoken about today, it allows organizations to really effectively deal with that, to understand what data they can delete, archive, migrate, encrypt, etc. The implementation of data loss prevention is a crucial one. Data loss prevention tools are typically not that intelligent. They're perimeter tools that, based on the tagging of a document, will determine if it can leave the environment or if it's blocked. By accurate classification across all of your data, again, emails, Word documents, databases, whether it's in your cloud, in your hybrid cloud, in your legacy data center, using Guardium and using GetVisibility allows you to really effectively enable data loss prevention, because once the data is accurately classified across hundreds of different fields, you can put very robust security controls around it. You can integrate the data problem into your Security Operations Center. This is really important. As we see it, currently we have large clients where we manage QRadar, we manage Palo Alto, we manage ForcePoint, we manage Trend Micro, and to a degree the organizations have the data question sitting within another facet within the organization. I fundamentally believe by collapsing the tech stack or integrating the tech stack, you can leverage your SOC to actually really effectively manage that whole problem as well, with the same resources that are managing the ticketing throughout the standard security process. These technologies help to accelerate cloud migration, understand what data is regulated, who has to have access to it, what controls you need around that data when you migrate it. One of the biggest problems we see is that when you classify data within an organization, there can be massive problems with the hygiene within Active Directory. So by running GetVisibility and Guardium within the estate, you very quickly can accelerate those projects, and you can overcome any objections from the governance, risk and compliance teams about that process. And then also the ability for enterprise information migration to ECM tools, and to understand, where the crucial and critical documents are going, the ability to track them, to understand duplication, and the ability effectively to deal with when you're looking at something like this COVID-19 crisis and people are accessing data from everywhere. Collaboration has gone crazy, which is a good thing to a degree. Maybe not so much if you don't have visibility of what's happening. And then to interlink it into your overall security posture. To wrap up, I'm coming to the end of the hour. Every investment we make in security, from our firewalls to our antivirus to our identity access, it's all about the data, and it's about protecting the data. And as I started out this presentation, I said, often when we deal with organizations and we talk about data, it feels like we cannot see the wood from the trees. And that's because of the sheer vast volume of data that's there. But that problem is now solvable by using these very intuitive, sophisticated technologies that leverage heavy automation, AI, ML, to allow organizations to finally understand that data and to adequately and effectively protect it. So Scott, I'll wrap up on that. I think I've just about hit my hour.
You hit the target, and we have a few minutes left for questions. One question I had, you mentioned QRadar and IBM Guardium. I think many people are familiar with Guardium, but maybe QRadar not so much. What is QRadar? What does it do? And how does your organization optimize or add value to it?
Yeah, so I mean, when you regularly talk about cybersecurity now, I know this is a bit of a strange thing to say, but it's almost not a cybersecurity issue anymore. It's almost a big data problem also. And the reason being is that when you look at all of the different security technologies an organization leverages to stay secure, it's vast. They're utilizing firewalls that are generating thousands and thousands of logs per day. They're using anti-malware programs. They're using antivirus programs. They're using identity access programs. They're using sandboxing technologies. They're generating syslogs. It's vast. It's absolutely vast. And by utilizing a technology like QRadar, it's a security information event management platform, it allows organizations to consolidate all of that data into a single monitoring tool. So for example, we have analysts working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, monitoring a lot of the leading companies in North America, Europe, and Asia. And they are using QRadar to collect, process all of the data within that organization and in that organization's security posture. So the ability to interrogate a suspicious offense within an organization and question, what did the firewall say? What did the antivirus say? What did the proxy say? What did the Windows log say? What did the Active Directory say? What did the identity access management say? And the ability to interrogate all of those products through a single pane of glass is incredibly powerful. And in this game, it's all about speed. He who is fastest wins. If you do not have the ability to crunch all of that data in real time, then you are always going to lose. So we use IBM QRadar has been the industry leading product for a number of years now. And the integration with Guardium and tools like GetVisibility are incredibly powerful.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions from our good-looking studio audience? I am monitoring the question queue. It's very good. So you talked about OneDrive and all these other clouds that people have access to. Are you actually able to tell that I took a company spreadsheet and copied it to my OneDrive? Is that something you can pick up?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. So every time you create, so you've two types. You've three types of data. You have the structured databases, which are, I mean, that's Guardium Sweet Point in terms of, and they are the real crown jewels in terms of intellectual property, large repositories of data. So Guardium does that very effectively. In terms of the unstructured stuff, whether it's in email or Word or Dropbox or OneDrive, every time you create and copy and duplicate a new piece of unstructured data, GetVisibility classifies that in real time. If that data contains intellectual property, it identifies that as being intellectual property based on the machine learning that has taken place. And then that can integrate into Guardium to alert that suspicious behavior has taken place with that data. So it's it becomes really, really powerful for organizations to manage that problem well.
That's fascinating. Good job. I'm glad you're paying attention to that and helping organizations secure their data. So that takes us to the top of the hour. If there's no further questions, we'll wrap up. And I have a polling question for everybody. Where's my polls? Here we go. We need to ask people if they learned anything today. One of my favorite questions, because the purpose, the goal, the mission of the show is to share valuable IBM technology information with the IBM community.
Does anybody ever answer no to this, Scott?
Every once in a while, we'll have a show where only 97 or 98% learn something. And perhaps that's because we have some very knowledgeable attendees in the audience. Maybe somebody created the presentation for the presenter and, they didn't learn anything because I already saw the presentation. But
Sure.
Usually we hit pretty high on this. And we're going to close the poll and share the results. 100% of our very good-looking studio audience learned something from you today. That's fantastic. I love it when that happens. All right, so thank you very much, audience, for being here, for participating in the polls. It's just not fun presenting if you don't have an audience. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you, Ronan, very much for being our guest and providing your insightful presentation. Thank you to our sponsors. The IBM community has made the DataView show possible. Again, email Stuart Littell. I put that in the chat message for you. Let them know you love the show and like it to continue. Our replays and show news are found at dataviewshow.com/news. We'll have a replay of today's show available in a few hours, and that's where you go to find the replay. All right, we wish Ronan and his team congratulations and stay safe. That's what we need everybody to do. Stay safe. Pandemic times and all. And with that, it's a wrap. Thank you, Ronan.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.